And now it is my privilege to welcome our next presenters, Dr. Annette Stanton and Reverend Dr. Tammie Denyse. Dr. Annette Stanton is Distinguished Professor and Chair of the Department of Psychology at UCLA, where she also holds an appointment in the Cousins Center for Psychoneuroimmunology and is a member of the Johnson Comprehensive Cancer Center. An author of more than 250 publications and a licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Stanton, through her research, identifies factors that promote or impede psychological and physical health in adults and couples experiencing cancers of the breast, eye, lung, and pancreas. She then translates her findings into action by developing and testing approaches to enhance psychological and physical health over the course of the cancer trajectory. A number of awards from national and international organizations have recognized her contributions in research, teaching, and service to the public and the profession. Reverend Dr. Tammie Denyse is co-founder and president of Carrie's Touch, a 501c3 nonprofit breast cancer organization established to enrich the lives of Black American women diagnosed with the disease. She is an 18-year breast cancer survivor and has spent the past 15 years coaching cancer patients and their families through the trauma of a cancer diagnosis, treatment, and re-entry after the journey through cancer. She is recognized as an expert in the field of breast cancer and Black women and is the co-principal investigator for Project SOAR, Speaking Our African American Realities, in partnership with the University of California, Los Angeles. Project SOAR examines the unique experiences of Black American women who are diagnosed with breast cancer. Reverend Dr. Tammie's work has been recognized locally, nationally, and globally for its innovative approaches to breast cancer survivorship and overall wellness. Please welcome Dr. Stanton and Reverend Dr. Denyse.
Thank you. And it's wonderful to we can't see any of you, actually. I was going to say it's wonderful to see you, but we can't see you. I can see, fortunately, Reverend Dr. Tammie, and I love being on air with you. Tammie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. And I would also like to thank you and the cancer support community of Los Angeles for having us. We are super excited to be here. So to make sure that we stay within our time frame, I am going to use notes a little bit. So if you see me look off to the side, I am using my notes. So our theme centers the voice of survivors. Giving voice to the voiceless is what grounds our qualitative research through Project SOAR, Speaking Our African American Reality. And the accompanying portraits that you'll see momentarily are women who are survivors, some of which were part of participants in Project SOAR. These women, we feel, give a true representation of the combination between beauty and pain and survivorship moving into thriving.
And we probably all know, I hope you all know, that that we're talking about something very serious today. Breast cancer is the leading cause of death for Black women in the United States. And even though, for example, Black women are 4% less likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer, they're more than 40% more likely than their white counterparts to die of the breast cancer. And I know, Tammie, you have some sentiment about this.
Absolutely. You know, I often become a little bit unnerved when we talk about that statistic of Black women dying at 41% higher rates than white women, because it's almost like it's second nature. You know, when you hear something over and over and over, you become numb to it. And that's what that 41% feels like, because when I was diagnosed almost 19 years ago, those were the exact same statistics that my oncologist gave to me. And so here today in 2023, we're saying the same numbers. I think that we need to start asking ourselves, why has this needle not moved? So yes, those are the facts. And along with those facts are the fact that the number hasn't moved, and that's problematic.
Absolutely. And Tammie, we've talked many times about, yes, Black women are more likely to be diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, for example. They're more likely to be diagnosed younger, but that really doesn't account for this 40% difference in mortality rate, right?
No, not at all, because we have spent a lot of time and effort and resources investigating young women diagnosed with breast cancer, triple negative, metastatic disease, as well as HER2. And there are more women, including myself, who are diagnosed with other types of breast cancer that should be included in the investigations around solving why Black women are still dying at such highly disproportionate rates than white women.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you and I came together, I think one of the things we'd like to talk to the group about today is really sort of how you and I came together. And as a community academic partnership, and we're funded by the California Breast Cancer Research Association, as well as the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. And but it was a really, I think, nice story, both how we came together in the first place, and then the process that we have developed as we've come together to do this kind of academic community partnership. So you want to talk about that?
Sure. So as a recipient of an award from the California Breast Cancer Research Project, we were charged with finding an academic partner to create a research project. And, you know, if I'm transparent in this conversation, I wanted it to be research with another Black investigator because I wasn't seeing myself represented in the research, and I wanted to do research differently. But as a community partner, I didn't have the quote unquote power to be able to do that. So we were charged with finding an academic partner, and we did find one. We found a Black woman, and life happened. And unfortunately, we had to very quickly find a new partner. And at that time, my colleague, Terry McClanahan, I always give her a nice shout out because Terry actually found you, found Annette, and she said, you know, I want you to check out this lady and have a conversation with her. I think she really is doing some work that marries well with what we are doing. And she said, but there's one caveat. And I said, okay. She said, she's a white lady. And I was like, oh no. But I had a conversation with Annette, and just immediately I knew that she understood what message I was trying to convey. She respected the fact that we had already done some, local research, and I had empirical data, and she respected that. She respected my ideas and my thoughts. And I was excited to connect with Annette. And we had a very short window to turn around our letter of interest back to the California CBCRP. And we did it. I'm trying not to step on Annette's toes because there's crucial parts to this story that are Annette's.
Well, and that gets us to sort of what the centerpiece of some of our research is, and that is the Strong Black Woman schema, also called the Black Woman, Superwoman schema. And the schema has several facets. One is a perceived obligation to present an image of strength, always being strong. A second is suppressing emotions. A third is prioritizing caring for others over caring for the self. Another one is declining support from other people, because to need support would mean that you were weak, for example. And then finally, attaining success with resources that aren't sufficient to getting success. And so Tammie told me when we first started talking a story that was, I guess, an aha moment for me. Tammie, you told me a story about your talking to another professional who was a white woman, and you were talking about the black superwoman, the strong black woman schema, and she said, "Well, isn't that white women too? Doesn't that also pertain to me as a white woman?" And you turned to her and said, "Well, no." And the no is about, you're a superwoman, you have a historical legacy of that. When to not be self-sacrificing, to not always care for others, means that you could be beaten, sold, or killed. That is only in the Black experience. It is not in white women's experience. So it truly is. And that really started us on I think what we would call a really culturally centered look at Black women's experience. And that's part of what we want to share with you today, because we have done 2 studies now, one qualitative study and one quantitative study. And our goal in the qualitative study was to capture women's voices, their real experience, and particularly centered around the strong Black woman schema. So we would like to share with you, just as we're sharing their beautiful portraits, we would like to share with you their experience today in their own words.
Yeah, and Annette, if I might chime in on that, and where this all centered was really in my personal experience, because I didn't feel like the care that I was getting was care that was concerned about me. I was offered an opportunity to participate in a clinical trial, and when I asked my oncologist how Black women were responding to this trial, he said he didn't know. And that just was mind-blowing to me, that here I was 39 years old, I'm fighting for my life. You tell me I can get a clinical trial, but you don't know how women that look like me are responding to this trial. And that was unacceptable for me. And I participated in the trial, not really to save my own life. I participated in the trial because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make it better for someone else. And as it turned out, I had the most side effects out of the 5,000 women that were in that trial. But they had to look at me because I had such an adverse response. Maybe, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy because I wanted to make a difference. But that is really why Project SOAR, it was important to make sure that we centered the women, their voices in their setting, in their communities, so that they could be empowered.
Absolutely. And that really, you and I and our team, we have a great team. Most are doctoral students in the Department of Psychology at UCLA, or former doctoral students now. And then also real community advocates from Tammie, your nonprofit, Carries Touch. And so we have worked together now for several years, and we decided, actually, one of our first articles about Project SOAR, Speaking Our African American Realities, focused on our process of forming this partnership and what has sustained us over the past several years as a community academic partnership. And we're going to email you all a few of our publications from Project SOAR, and this is one of them. And we call our approach to community academic partnerships the Ubuntu approach. And that was published in 2022. Wow, we haven't known each other that long. In 2022, and Tammie, do you want to talk about the Ubuntu approach?
Yes, we decided on using the language Ubuntu. First of all, everything about this project, if you haven't noticed so far, is culturally centered. We wanted to make sure that we were bringing cultural understanding, cultural humility to this project. And so Ubuntu is a phrase that was first presented by Bishop Desmond Tutu. And Ubuntu, paraphrased, is I am because you are. And so his philosophy around that was that we were greater together if we moved together in tandem for the greater good. So using that philosophy to help ground our approach in Project SOAR, we look at the principles for initiating and supporting meaningful and productive community academic research partnerships. 1, to take risk. 2, to identify and align our core values. 3, to create connection. 4, to convey respect. 5, to cultivate trust. And 6, to put the work first, or to put the women first, to center the women, because that is the direct benefit back to the community. And I just want to tell I don't think the slides are moving. I don't see them moving.
Oh.
Yeah. You can just put it on play. We won't ask for you to, you can just hit play and they will loop on their own. Thank you. Sorry about that. So yeah, so a benefit back to the community. We definitely believe that if we can pour into the woman who is often the center of the family, we help the well-being of the woman, we help the well-being of the family, and in return, we help well-being of community. And that was the philosophy of Bishop Tutu.
And I think it was ours too. That really was our central core value, to work together and to benefit community, to benefit Black women who are diagnosed with breast cancer. So I think that we aligned around our core values, and we developed this Ubuntu approach that was consistent with Bishop Tutu's philosophy. And so one way we did that, and now we want to get into talking about the words of the women. One way we did that was to develop culturally curated focus groups. And we didn't at first, and this was brilliance of Tammie, we didn't want to call them focus groups. And instead we called them gatherings, because gatherings is such a more welcoming word than is the traditional focus group. We also a traditional focus group, typically it's one person asking questions, and the focus groups last for, an hour, sometimes up to 2 hours, and people are brought in, they're asked questions, and then they leave. But that's not the way we did the gatherings. Really, instead, women came in, they were welcomed, they were offered some breakfast. As they completed their final forms, they actually began to talk a little bit together during that time. And then there was an icebreaker, so that women were able to get to know each other just a little bit, and often laugh together. Then was that sort of traditional focus group part, where there was Tammie and one of my doctoral students, now Dr. Kim Martin, conducted all of these in 3 different cities in California. And they posed questions. But the team, I have to say, ended up listening to all of the recordings of these 3 focus groups. And they were so different from the usual focus groups because what you heard as women talked about their experience were women affirming each other. You heard a lot of, and that's right. And you could tell that this was just not a traditional focus group. And then after the focus group, again, there was breaking bread together over lunch. I was not, I should say.
I was going to say,
yeah.
I was like, you're missing a key part.
Big part. I was not present in these focus groups because it was an all Black, all woman space. They were in 2 cases, they were conducted in homes. In 1 case, they were conducted in part of a church. And so it really was a different kind of space for Black women. So we want to tell you about some of that, some of what the women said and some of the themes we found. But Tammie, you want to say more about the gatherings?
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea behind it really, again, came out of our empirical study and experience. We understand that there are trust issues in the Black community with regard to interacting with medical professionals. And some of it is warranted and other times it isn't. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't in hospital settings, that we weren't in sterile settings that might be triggering to them, because for many Black women, based in my experience in service to them, those experiences are not always pleasant experiences. And so we wanted to make them feel comfortable and, in a sense, at home, which is why we elected to have the gatherings in homes. And we knew that we were going to have to create an experience for them from the moment they walked through the door until the moment they left. And it was funny because when I said to Annette, Annette said, well, do you think they should be 90 minutes or 2 hours? And I said, I think they should be 4 hours. And she goes, you're never going to get anybody to come to a focus group for 4 hours. And I said, you're absolutely right. But if we create a cultural experience that centers these women, that shows that that we understand the culture. And not only are we going to go in and ask questions because we are investigating something, but we're going to pour back into them and leave them with a gift. And that set the tone for the focus groups. And I said to Annette, I said, and you can't be in the room, because no matter how understanding you are, no matter how compassionate you are, and all of those things, anytime non-Black people come into an all Black space, it changes the dynamics, and we're not going to get the level of response that we want if you're in the room. And I am just grateful. I say this to you all the time, Annette, but I am truly grateful for you for just supporting that thought that you could not be in the room. And I think, we see now that it really was the right choice.
I think it absolutely was the right choice. And I appreciate that. Well, if you're listening here and watching, you see us talking as we talk to each other all the time. Tammie was really honest by saying, nope, you can't be in the room. And I said, darn, and I understand. And so we've actually had, it's interesting now because we've had gathering reunions, and so Tammie has invited me at the very end of it to join first by asking the women in the gathering, but then asked me to join to present some of our findings. And so I ultimately was able to come into the room a little bit to share. And for me, that's been a huge honor. So that's been important.
I think the other crucial part for our participants to hear is that I also requested that I lead the gatherings and not even having Dr. Kim Martin lead as the representative of UCLA, because we wanted to, there's a history of academicians going into the community, doing research, hosting focus groups, getting what they want. They leave the community and they never return. And we wanted to change that dynamic. We wanted to let them know that, hey, the community has a voice in what we are doing. And we are in partnership. It's not UCLA led. It's not Carrie's Touch led. We are in partnership. And to be able to show that was a huge risk on your behalf, Annette, with me. We worked together for a while before we actually conducted our first gathering. So you knew that you could trust me in that space, but it still was a very bold and courageous risk.
Well, and I think thank you. And I think it just as an illustration of our commitment to putting the work first. And that means putting the women first. Mm-hmm. And I forgot one other point of a part of the gathering. And at the end of the gathering, again, to send women away with a feeling of benefit, there needed to be benefit from start to finish, and benefit to the community from start to finish in this. And to say, after the lunch where there was more discussion, there always was also something that would be that they could leave with feeling that they had benefit in addition to the financial compensation we gave them. And that was often it was an inspirational speaker. One time, and I think that this was the most popular one, it was blowing bubbles. And so, Tammie, do you want to say something about that?
Sure. I wish we had a picture of those particular women blowing bubbles, but the presenter, she came. So the idea is, a lot of Black women come into these medical diagnoses and spaces with a lot of trauma. And in our community and culturally, a lot of times we don't talk about that trauma. And we take on more and more trauma. And we were keenly aware that the probability of us engaging some women who have never talked about their breast cancer diagnosis could be triggering to them. And we didn't want to have them leave the gathering, this wonderful 4-hour experience, and then go home and be triggered and not know how to manage psychologically any feelings or emotions that they had as a result. So we wanted to be able to put a cap back on all of those feelings and emotions. And that's when we invited the special guest at each gathering. And this particular presenter, she talked about child's play. And so, adulting is difficult in and of itself. It doesn't matter what your ethnic makeup is. Adulting is difficult and complex. And she talked about the psychology of, children just being unabandoned and being able to go outside and be free and play. And she had gone to one of her relatives' birthday parties one time. The thank you gift was bubbles. And she had had a very stressful week. She sat in her car before she went in the house. She saw the bubbles sitting on her dash and she said, I'm going to blow these bubbles. And she blew the bubbles, and it gave her an immediate calming effect and experience. And so that's what she brought to us. And it happened with us. We were like little kids outside blowing bubbles. And just to have the release and the relief that it provided just gave us tremendous joy. And we, again, knew that we were on the right track with how we were conducting and closing our focus groups.
Yes. And I would so wish we had a picture of that, because I would love to see those pictures. But so let's get into some of our findings and we're going to share findings with you today of our qualitative study. So the what came out of the gatherings, and we did formal qualitative analysis on this, on women's voices. And we thought we'd share with you the themes and the women's voices and especially with relevance to the strong Black woman schema, the Black woman's superwoman schema. And so the first theme that came from the qualitative analysis was we called the historical legacy of the strong Black woman. And here women talked about both their personal histories, but also their cultural history of in the United States as Black women and Black people. And so one woman said, a strong Black woman is a concept that refers to Black women having to bear the brunt of emotionally damaging experiences and still keep pushing through life. Experiences such as Black men being lynched, castrated, giving birth and having babies ripped from your arms, and kids being shot by the police. We have to bear it all and still keep going. Another quote is, I always go back to my favorite quote of Zora Neale Hurston. It says, Black women have been socialized to be the pack mules of the world. So women brought their personal history, but also this historical legacy into their experience of being diagnosed with cancer.
Our next theme talks about navigating intersecting strong Black woman identities. Of course, none of us engage life in just one lane. We have intersecting identities at work, at church, at home, in social gatherings and such. And so one of the women said, like, we have some innate stresses that just come up with just being a Black woman, like just to exist. You know, some things that we already have to deal with that are separate from, you know, those are just our everyday stresses, you know, that they are different from other races of women. And then on top of that, then it's the things that we put on top of ourselves. And then it's the things that come hit us like a Mack truck, like breast cancer and worries and dealing with just the stresses of being alive, discrimination and racism and things like that. Another woman, I get a little emotional. I was in the room with the women and I've had my own personal experience. So I get a little emotional when I read their words at times. Another woman who we have named one of our publications simply says, no complaining, no crying. And yet another woman says, in dealing with your health, you just have to keep a positive attitude and you let your you're not a crybaby, you're strong, and you let your family see you standing up and being a strong person and handling your problem, the breast cancer.
You know, as I hear you read those words and listen to I hear the women's voices from the recordings, and I also think about the gathering reunions that we had to bring the women back together in these three spaces. And I remember when we shared some of the findings and told them that we were calling one of our articles, No Complaining, No Crying. The woman who said that was there and she started to cry. And it was so meaningful to her that her words were going to be in the world.
Yes.
To explain the experience. Do you remember that?
I absolutely remember it. And I also remember when we shared the publications with the women and, you know, we had to change their names to protect their privacy. And we got calls back that saying, hey, I know those were my words, but my name isn't Maxine. So the pride that these women have to know that their words are literally being not just read and heard, but making a difference. It's very meaningful.
Yes. Um, and so another theme that we found was what we called everyday challenges encountered on the battlefield by strong Black women in their experience in general and in their breast cancer experience. And I remember I asked our group, you know, thinking about cancer as a battlefield, not this, but thinking about cancer as a battlefield, it has a downside because it means that you can, you know, that one, you need to be a warrior, and two, you can lose the battle. And that can bring a sense of failure. And so I asked the group, the coders, in our meetings, because Tammie and I didn't code, our team coded, and said, do we want to use the battlefield word? And the team very strongly said yes, because that is some women's experience in their lives as a strong Black woman diagnosed with cancer. So the words of women for that theme are, I think a lot of times there is no support because people don't think you need it. I mean, it's not necessarily that we're declining support. In some cases, there just isn't any, or, you know, they just assume you don't need it. Another woman said, it's not just the image. She is literally expected to do everything: cook, clean, pay the bills, you name it. And so the burdens were characterized by feeling as if women were on a battlefield. And then breast cancer was smacked on top of it like a Mack truck.
Right. And one of the symptoms of being a strong Black woman is caring for others over yourself. And so on top of all of that, being a caregiver to other people and not even seeing sometimes the strong Black woman in the Black woman that you're supporting, leads us to our next theme: strong Black women in action during the breast cancer journey. But what came up was that my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer a month after I was diagnosed. And it's just funny because I think about how strong I was, and I didn't want anybody to help me. I was trying to drive, I was camping, I was doing this and doing that, and just trying to run the house, everything but going to work. I mean, literally, I was cleaning up and everything. I even let family members come stay with me that were displaced from Hurricane Katrina, that were displaced. And we had 5 more family members, including kids, in my house. And I was trying to take care of them too. So now my mom, is in the house by herself, and she's diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And I'm going through my breast cancer. And I'm looking at her trying to do everything. And I'm asking her, what's your plan for treatment? Who are you going to have to take care of you? So I kept asking, who you going to have? Who you going to have? Because I felt like she needed somebody, but I didn't feel like I needed anybody. I was looking at my mom like, you can't be the strong Black woman, but I can be her. I can do everything. Another woman said, the definition of a strong Black woman, feels like it's me, even though going through this breast cancer journey, because I continued to keep my grandson, because I didn't want my son and his wife to have to find a babysitter or worry about that or pay other people. So even when I was going through, I still continued to keep my grandson, or always managed to find someone to keep him.
I think you're hearing the facets of the strong Black woman lived out in women's experiences, and this also was expressed in accepting and seeking help and support. And so that became really complex for women. And that's our next theme, the complexities of seeking and accepting support. So one woman said, our families expect a lot from us. And what my breast cancer diagnosis also taught me is that I allowed them to expect a lot from me, that I didn't allow them to see me as weak. You know, it was my children that said to me that all we saw was this in you, because I couldn't talk to them about how I was feeling because they couldn't handle the weak part of me. I finally said, I don't want you to babysit your feelings, right? I need to be able to come into an avenue which, if I want to cry, I can cry. If I want to be sad, it's okay. If I want to be in that dark space, let me be in that dark space and feel safe about being in that dark space, because I'm going to come out of it. But I still have to kind of go inward in order for me to come outward. And I think I'm glad that as time has gone by, my immediate family has seen that. Oh, I'm getting emotional about these quotes too, Tammie. Another woman said, I think probably the one thing that was kind of a dual street is that when you go to your church and you tell so many of your friends that may be church members, they always tell you to pray. Well, we all know about praying, but you need a little bit more than that. So the complexity of interacting with your community, even those closest to you, even your church community, even your family members, can be complicated.
Absolutely. And the strong Black woman concept or schema is multifaceted. And I credit Annette with making sure that we didn't only look at the complex sides of the facet, but we also looked at the rewarding sides of the facets, because we do have a sense of cultural pride when we look at our ancestors and our foremothers, and we stand on their shoulders proudly, and we should be able to carry that with us. And that takes us to our next theme, the liberated, strong Black woman. One woman's words are, so once, when my friend told me I needed to let other people take care of me, I stood back and said, can I do that? And so now when somebody want to come into my kitchen and do my dishes, I say, go right ahead. And they say, okay, you've done enough. I say, okay. But it took me years to learn how to let someone take care of me. And that's a lesson. As Black women, we have to learn how to let other people take care of us. And when we look in the mirror at ourselves, we have to be confident enough that we can say, I'm beautiful the way I am. I can let you take care of me, and I can still be independent. That's something we have to learn, though. Another woman. So the strong part of me was that I had to get better for me first, because if I didn't get better for me, I can't do anything for any of those people out there. And yet another woman. Coming from being a former athlete, I was more of a tomboy growing up, and I always hung out with my dad. And as I got older, I thought being a strong Black woman was being tough and being fearless, and whatever the case may be, because of being an athlete, until I got this cancer journey. There's no comparison. The piece I would add, the strong Black woman to the strong Black woman definition is compassion. We have to have compassion for ourselves.
And so I'm hoping that you all can see in these women's words that the eloquence and both the burdens and the incredible resilience that women have as they go through their experience. The gatherings were so rich that we also have another paper about the women in their interactions with the medical system, with the oncologic system. And we have another paper about the role of spirituality in women's lives. Not that every woman there were 37 women in the gatherings. They ranged from 2 months since diagnosis to 29 years. They ranged in age from 30 to 94. But they weren't all religious in a traditional sense. And nonetheless, women really had often very strong spiritual foundations. We're also finding in our quantitative study of 112 Black women diagnosed with breast cancer that the strong Black woman facets that we mentioned, and you hear so prominently in these themes, more endorsement of the strong Black woman facets were associated with greater depression in the women. They were associated with greater fatigue and other difficult outcomes. And the strong Black women facets that seemed to be most important there in the quantitative study was suppressing emotions and resisting help, resisting support. Those seem to be the most potent in terms of their relationships with some of the difficult outcomes. So what we're doing now is continuing to publish our studies. We're just working on our quantitative analyses now, and we're working on resources for Black women diagnosed with breast cancer. The gatherings were so powerful. We know that will be a component in a somewhat different way of the resources we're promoting, developing. And we also know it was so interesting because when we did the gathering reunions, one of the things that was said was, okay, so in our next steps with Project SOAR, should we focus on the system? Should we focus on the oncologist? Should we focus on the treating system? Try to change that, a systems intervention. And women said, no, focus on us. Focus on us and what we can do. And so those are going to be our next steps for Project SOAR.
Yes, and since the images are going by, again, some of the women that you have seen were participants in the project, and the images up here. This woman is actually a previvor. She tested 90-something% positive for the BRCA gene. Her mom died of breast cancer. She was pregnant at the time, and that's her daughter. That was her daughter in the image with her. And we created this project because a lot of women go to Dr. Google to find out their information and what they might look like. And we wanted to show them real life examples of what some of the surgeries can look like so that they could see that this was a young woman, 4-time survivor, was in school for nursing, and she's still with us because she was able to see an image of herself alive and living. And when we started the project, that wasn't very prominent in anywhere. You couldn't find images of Black women surviving and being beautiful. Annette, I think you're muted if you were saying something.
Oh no, I think those are the points we wanted to make, and I appreciate the gratitude that we got through the question and answer. And I don't know if Mara or someone else is coming on to talk with us.
I am. I'm here. I was just mesmerized by all that amazing testimonials. And, I just want to give you all the opportunity to share those voices, that they so graciously shared with you. And it's so important. And that brings me to a question. And this is my personal question. And, what recommendations would either of you have for healthcare organizations and institutions so that we can ensure that the voices of Black women are not only heard, but also effectively integrated into decision-making processes related to cancer care and survivorship?
Oh,
Oh,
Tammie, you've got that clinical care pathways, right?
clinical care pathways, but that is such a big question. And just like trying to understand solving for that 41%, it is a huge answer and multifaceted. I am of the belief that as we can empower women to use their voices, that is definitely a step one. Building healthy patient-physician relationships where a patient can actually go into the doctor, express what he or she is experiencing with their doctor, and they have trust that that doctor really cares for her and is providing her or him the best care available to them. As we are preparing, I think this paper is out. The healthcare manuscript is actually out and available, and you'll see in the women's voices, based on their experiences, that is not what they experience on a regular basis. So I think if we look at the healthcare systems, it is crucial that we start with open, safe, trusted lines of communication as a starting point.
And I think that requires, and physicians, nurses, others in the system they have their own pressures to be quick to sort of come quickly to a diagnosis, come quickly to be efficient in their appointments. But I think one of the ways we establish trust is to listen. And it does really require somebody taking an oncologist, and so many of my oncologist colleagues do this, to take the time to listen, to not assume that a Black woman is just going to be strong and motor through it, even if she presents as incredibly strong. The compassion and willingness to listen seems to be important to me.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And I would just add to that, it's going to take some training as well, but that's something that's in the pipeline and in the works, and it's going to take time. But I think Annette's final sentence, the willingness, is imperative and is what can help shift the dynamics.
Thank you. You guys had some really great points in terms of how we can get started to make those changes in those systems. We had a question come in asking, what kind of follow-up have you had with the women in the study?
Very positive follow-up. Let's start there. Initially, I think we had several follow-up surveys when we first engaged the women in the gatherings. For context, we had our gatherings in 2019, and then COVID came in 2020 and shifted all in-person interactions and things. So we did surveys. I think it was 6 weeks out, then it was like 90 days, and I think it was almost like a year. And then we lost contact a little bit, but we had very positive responses. I don't have those numbers in front of me with the percentages of women that responded to each of the surveys. But when we came back for the reunions in 2023, women were elated that we actually came back, and they were super excited to see that their words were in print and in academic journals.
They were, and I think that they said that in some of the follow-up surveys, they said that it was that some of the most meaningful aspects were being able to connect with other Black women, and in an all-Black, all-woman space, to be able to share their story with other Black women. Most of the Black women had never been in an all-Black, all-woman space to talk about their breast cancer experience. And so it was a really unique experience for women. And that's part of I think, the power. We also, ask women just to share their words with us about their experience of the gatherings. And one woman said, "This was a life-changing event for me. It changed." And Tammie, sort of how her life was changed. But the responses were very positive.
We have another question that came in. What were some of the challenges that both of you faced, if any, in bringing together an academic institution and a community partner?
This might not sound real, but I don't think we faced a lot of challenges. I think for me, the biggest challenge that we faced was the unknown. Me as a community partner, not knowing as much red tape that you have to go through with an academic institution. And based on my experience, one of the greatest challenges is, these are my words for Annette, was understanding community and timing. We're in a social media era where we have to put things on social media at a certain time. And if we say that the survey is coming on this date, and for whatever reason, it doesn't come on that date, that is a huge issue in social media as regard to our credibility. And so it was learning the things that we didn't know about each other's communities, and about how we navigate those spaces. That's on my side. Annette.
Yeah, I think it is that learning how, and I really appreciated learning about the importance of that, because, as an academic, I, certainly have deadlines, but I also can have some flexibility, if it's not quite right yet, you just work on it some more. And I personally avoid social media like the plague. So learning about, there really is a deadline here, and it's important because you've committed yourself. I mean, Tammie had committed herself on social media, and that's really important for her nonprofit organization. So I think we both learned some things, but I don't because we established pretty early on this talking to each other honestly, and establish that trust, that there weren't really very many true barriers or conflicts or problems.
So I'm going to flip that question now and ask you, what advice do you have for the broader healthcare community, including researchers, policymakers, healthcare providers, and advocacy organizations, to better collaborate with Black women to advance the goal of achieving health equity in cancer care and survivorship?
I'll let you start, Annette.
Okay. I think that researchers and systems and oncologic care need to be willing to devote the time. Because, really building relationship takes time. And so, for example, if you're a very beginning professor, these kind of, it might be more challenging for you to do these kinds of projects. You need, as oncologic systems, need to take time to listen. Because the way we work, pretty much everything is a shared decision. And so if you have that kind of collaboration when you're truly making decisions together, instead of Tammie making the decisions about some things and me making decisions about others, it just takes more time. And so time and patience is something that is so well worth it, and so required. But we get through. In many ways, I can't tell you how worth it is. This has been one of the most meaningful projects of my life and continues to be. And it simply is the benefit, and the benefit to Black women. Again, that's our common value.
And what I would add to that, and I have to give credit to CBCRP, when we were building our project, again, I bring up the processes of an academic institution. But I remember when we were beginning this project, and Annette was just doing her regular UCLA paperwork, things that she does all the time, and she wasn't trying to exclude me. She just had never been forced to include another partner on the UCLA paperwork. And the representative from CBCRP said, no, this has to have Carrie's touch on this paperwork. And so Annette was like, oh no, we understand what this is. And, it's no problem. There was nothing, she just was doing what she normally did. And the CBCRP representative was insistent that this could not go forward until our organization was officially on that paperwork. And so when you talk about listening, it is, for me, it's always making sure that we are on equal footing. She's Annette and I'm Tammie. Forget titles, forget experience, forget all of that stuff. She's a human being, and so am I. And that's how we engage one another. We find it worthy to take the time to listen. And if she's uncomfortable about something, she comes to me and we have an open and honest conversation about it. If I'm uncomfortable about something, I go to her and we have an open and honest conversation about it. And we listen and we respect one another and we come to a resolve that we both feel valued in that resolution.
Thank you so much, Boso. Thank you to Dr. Stanton, and thank you to Reverend Dr. Denyse for sharing those wonderful voices of the women that you work with, and making sure that, all the attendees here are able to hear those voices. And I know that the PDF of those articles, that were shared in the chat, are available for you to download if you want to learn more. But thank you very much for coming here today and sharing that wonderful results of that SOAR project with us.